Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Meaningful Hearts podcast. Today is a continuation of our previous episode, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. For those of you who haven't heard it, it's okay. You can still listen to this and it'll still make sense because we'll make references. But if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, we definitely recommend you to go back so that you have some context. But again, it's okay. You're here. You're ready. Let's go.
Let's go.
So during our previous episode, like I said, we talked about the four horsemen, and these horsemen are essentially what damages a relationship. So as Drew and I were conversing, we were talking about how great it would be if we talked about the antidotes. I mentioned in the previous episode, I learned about Dr. John and Julie Gottman through Tony Robbins, and then I listened to them. I didn't listen. I came across them again during my studies, and I thought it was really fascinating, the work that they do. And they really talk a lot about relationships and how to make relationships work.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I would say they're a really interesting couple. I've listened to some of the podcasts they were featured on, and their story is quite interesting. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but they're a fun-loving couple that's very intensely in love with each other. They've been together for a very long time. They were proposed to be married within 5 months, so just gives you an idea of the longevity of the type of love and bond they have together. Just adding that in there.
Well, thank you for adding that in there. Yes, they pretty much are relationship experts. I actually didn't know their past. I just knew the work that they did. But in any case, like we said, the four horsemen previous episode, now we're going to be talking about the antidotes to these four horsemen. So for just review, right? The first horseman of the apocalypse is criticism. Now, Dr. John and Julie Gottman, their antidote to criticism is what they call gentle startup. Now, when I was listening to them on Tony Robbins, not them, but when I was listening to Tony Robbins called it a stack foundation and admiration. And this is essentially seeing the good qualities in your partner and being able to speak in unarguables. So what exactly does this mean in terms of relationships is knowing how to talk to each other using assertive communication. This is very, very big. Drew and I actually instinctively use this. I learned this, I think, just naturally throughout my work and working on myself, how to properly communicate using I statements, like I said, and really expressing what you're feeling versus criticizing the other person. Having warm body language is important. Remembering that, I think in this particular one of the main things to remember is that it's you and me versus the problem, not you versus me.
That is correct. That's something that you really need to solidify and understand. If you don't understand that, then you need to understand that.
And it takes practice, right? I mean, I didn't always know how to properly communicate, and sometimes it's still, I think I've caught myself slipping a couple of times, but it's really about practicing the habit of I feel this way when this happens, or whatever the case may be. So that's the first antidote to one of the four horsemen. The second one is appreciation, and that goes to contempt. So the horseman is contempt, and the antidote to that is that appreciation. This is honestly one of my favorite ones, and I think, Drew, you and I, this is like very big in our relationship.
Yes.
Because we make it a point naturally. It's not forced either. We we make it a point to let each other know how much we appreciate each other on a daily basis. If not on a daily basis, definitely throughout the week. But this is important because in the very beginning of relationships, oftentimes we see our partner as perfect, right? Like our partner's so amazing, you know, you're so awesome, the compliments come, etc., etc. And as things start to happen within the relationship, that starts to fade. That appreciation kind of really doesn't happen as much anymore because you're focused on the things that your partner does that aren't good. So making sure that you establish that level of appreciation and gratitude, and not just, you know, depending on your love language. Drew and I like to make each other stuff, which I think is awesome, but we also use words of affirmation and appreciation. We let each other know. Kind of figuring that out within your relationship is key. Knowing, you know, how to express your appreciation and when to.
Yeah, I think that's key, to know and when. But I think it's also a feeling of, it's natural. I guess you just, it comes out of you. Like, and it doesn't have to be something grand. It doesn't have to be something crazy. It could just be say, hey, I just want to let you know that I think you're beautiful, and that
Well, thank you.
You make my heart smile. Little things like that. And these are things that just come from, they're organic. They're not, damn, I gotta find a love poem. I gotta find something that's going to be groundbreaking. No, it's just simple things that compound. Good, beautiful things that you could say to your partner and make them feel good, and tell them that wow, I think I was thinking about you. I just, or little gestures, things like that. They really go a long way. And over time, and this is something that is practiced, you're going to see that it's just, your relationship is going to be so much sweeter.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as you were saying that, one of the things that I so much appreciate about, I mean, I appreciate so many things about you, but when it comes to appreciation in particular, sometimes like if I'm out with my friends or if you're out doing your thing, you know, those brief moments where we check in with each other and we're like, I'm thinking of you. Like, I always think that that's so wonderful. It's such a relief compared to previous relationships where I've been in. And I think that that's the expectation that people fall into in their relationships, is that when you're out kind of doing your own thing, and when I say doing your own thing, I don't mean doing something that's disrespectful to your relationship. I mean, whether it's hanging out with your friends, if you play a sport, or even just like with work, right? People fall into these unhealthy patterns of, I must know what you're doing at all times. You must check in with me, because if you don't check in with me, I don't know what you're doing. And it's not that I don't trust you, it's that I don't trust other people. And then it's like this whole thing,
that
right?
is one of the most, I think that's probably one of the top 10 most toxic things you could say to somebody. It's not that I don't trust you, I just don't trust other people. Now, yeah. Granted, if there's a scenario where I'm like, yeah, you're walking the neighborhood at night, I don't trust other people because you could get attacked. But yeah, the other person can't make you cheat. It's kind of, the person will willingly cheat. If God forbid somebody forced themselves on them, that's a different scenario. But to say that I don't want you around anyone, or possible situations where that could occur, you don't trust that person. You just don't. I'm sorry, you don't have enough faith. And if you have to live in that world where you feel that way, first of all, that's not a way to live. You're at that point, that person's like an employee to you. You have to make sure that they're doing their job. That's not a way to live.
Yeah. And when I've had conversations, whether it's with my clients or just people in general, and that comes up, my response is, okay, so you trust your significant other, you don't trust other people, but ultimately that sounds like you still don't trust your significant other to know how to respond. Because Drew and I are both attractive people, or at least I like to think so. I'm attracted to him, he's attracted to me. I think we're good looking.
We got it going on. We do. We got it going on. And we stay fit. We stay fit.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if, say, for example, like Drew is out and there's a woman who, like, you know, he catches her eye or she catches his eye. No, I think it would be like,
I catch her eye, because if she catches my eye, then I'm like, oh, who is that?
Right. I just didn't know how to say it.
That's cool.
But that's, you know, that's not improbable, but I know that I trust you to know how to respond if she were to approach you, just like, vice versa, right? If somebody were to approach me, and this is where like uncomfortable conversations start to happen, because it's more likely for a man to approach a female than for a
Yeah.
female to approach a guy. But it does happen, right? Some women who are super confident, who,
Yeah.
are confident in their abilities, like in their game, they're willing to do so. But in any case, the point is that those things are possible, but I know that I trust you to know how to respond to that person if that were to happen, just like I know, and we've had conversations about it, right? Where
Yeah.
you've reassured me that you trust me to know how to respond. And it's a very awesome feeling. I don't know how else to describe it other than like, even that is a form of appreciation and reassurance, building that culture. Like, I trust you. I appreciate that you are you, and for you to be open with me about what's going on. Like, you can tell me about the things that go on with your friends, like later on when you're out. Like, the main thing for the both of us is, I just want to know when you're home safe, and
Yep.
knowing that I'm trusted in that sense, it builds an awesome culture, which is kind of like a little bit off a tangent off the appreciation, but I think it still goes hand in hand.
Precisely. I think that's exactly it. And you got to find that ground with the person that you're with. I think that a lot of people struggle with this one, but like I said, it's within reason. Now, it's never okay. I don't think it's ever okay to say, "Oh, I'm going to go on a one-on-one outing with the opposite sex." That's not cool. That's a different story. See, like there are scenarios that you just don't invite yourself to, and that's out of respect, right? So you got to understand that. But she could be with her friends, I could be with my friends, and scenarios can come up where, yes, in passing, somebody might say something to me or come up to me. I mitigate that. I mitigate that at all costs, and that's that. And that's something that comes with trust. And you have to trust that person, because if you can't do that, if you don't feel that way, then there's a problem. There's a problem with you, and maybe in your past, and you have to work through that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So before we like get carried away, super carried away on a tangent here, which we already are, that was the second antidote, appreciation, and we kind of added our own thing. So now the third one is
defensiveness.
Well, defensiveness is the horseman.
The horse, yeah. Well, I'm talking about the horseman. I mean,
yeah,
the horseman's got to ride in town.
Oh, I said antidote.
All right.
That's okay.
I'll take responsibility.
Ooh, there you go.
That.
That's awesome. No pun intended, or like cliche, I don't know. But yes, Drew is correct. The third antidote is taking responsibility. And this is a big part of this, at least for me, is accepting that you and your partner can have two different experiences based off the same event. And it's important to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Going back to what we were talking about with you versus me, and how that, is really conflicting. It's supposed to be you and me versus a problem. But when it's you versus me, people become so caught up in proving their point that they miss the idea that it's important to apologize to your partner when you've hurt their feelings and have done any wrongdoing. Like I looking back on our episode, I'm not sure if I used the trash example, but I think that I did, like taking out the trash. If I didn't, this is a good time. But say, for example, Drew has had a really long day, and he usually is the one that takes out the trash. And the one day he doesn't take out the trash, and I come along and I say, "Well, why didn't you take out the trash?" And his response, his unhealthy response, would be like, "Well, I always do it. Why can't you do it this time?" Right? And then that has the potential to start an argument.
Yes.
We've both had different experiences over a trash, like a trash bag or whatever the case may be, a can. If you throw out trash cans, I don't know. But in any case, the better way to address that would be to say, "You know what? I'm sorry, I just didn't get to it today. I've had a really long day." And taking responsibility over your feelings And then I can turn around and say, oh, you've had a really long day. You know what? I got it. Today I can do it. I'm sorry that, I didn't take into consideration that you may have had a really long day. And this is essentially, at least for me, what taking responsibility looks like, taking ownership of your feelings and the role that you play in the relationship as a whole, not just in disagreements, but just, what are you bringing to the relationship? What part of yourself are you bringing? Are you bringing the best part of you? Are you bringing the part of you that isn't healed? What does that look like? I think that also plays into responsibility as well.
And I also think that it's not a game of keeping score. You're not keeping score of
Well, that's a big one.
who did more than the other, right? Listen, it's been a long day. Just like she's had a long day. Hey, I'll cook. I'll throw something together, or she'll cook. We don't put the stake in the ground and say, all right, you're going to do this and I'm going to do that. Unless, however, she's better at something than I am and it just happens to work out that way. But either way, I will still try to pull the weight on that if she's not up for it. It's not about, oh, you're not holding your weight. It's about, hey, you're tired, and I get it. I appreciate all the things that you do, and I want to make you feel good. It's also wanting to make that person feel good and say, hey, I got your back. I'm on your team. We're not employees getting a salary. I think that's very important, and I think it feels good. I got it. Don't worry about it. Take a rest. Go soak in the tub. It's a really good thing when you could just debrief for a moment, knowing that that the person that you're with has your back, and they're not going to resent you or make you feel bad for it. And I think that's part of owning up to the responsibility.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's about the questions that we ask ourselves instead of keeping score and attacking. Like, I could be upset with you that you didn't take out the trash, or I could ask myself, this is something that he usually does. What's happening in his day that he didn't, and how can I help, type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a good one.
It's a very good one.
Moving on to the fourth antidote. Well, first, the fourth horseman man is stonewalling. So this is when or a partner completely checks out, shuts down. I honestly think this is a little more common in men. And you kind of correct me if I'm wrong here, because men are used to either finding a solution or not talking about their feelings. I think it's changing a lot now, but I would still say that it's more common for a man to stonewall than a woman. What are your thoughts before we go through the antidote?
I would say it depends. I would say that they do, men do tend to, I guess, go straight to the problem instead of going through the emotional aspect of it. Right. We just find that instead of going to the root cause of why we're feeling the way we're feeling and explaining and expressing ourselves, it's more like, yeah, let's solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And that's it, and let's move forward. I, however, have dealt with somebody who stonewalled the shit out of me in the past. And I literally, I was like, wow, this is literally the worst thing ever, because it was all the time and it took forever to finally have a conversation. I'm like, why couldn't we have this conversation? Why did it take 5 days? Why did you put me through hell for 5 days? I mean, I gave you space too. Maybe I was a little intense in meeting, but I did give you space. It's part of your responsibility to now come and speak to me. We're sharing the same space together, or we're in a relationship together. You're gonna make me feel like I did the unforgivable when it was something so simple,
Sure.
It sucks. It really does. It's like solitary confinement with somebody that you care about.
Yeah, when you get shut out.
Yeah, it sucks. That one really, it really does. It really sucks, mm-hmm. Because so you're not giving me a sign whether what are we breaking up? Like, what are we doing? You're not giving me any affection. You're not giving me any reassurance that you're in the same headspace in the relationship. I understand you could be mad for a certain period of time, but for days on end, it's like, okay, that's not fair. That's psychological warfare. That's crazy.
Yeah, I can take accountability. I know my own previous experiences, I've definitely stonewalled too. It wasn't until I was checked out and I was just tapped out of the relationship. But I can still say, hey, I like now looking back on it, and as you and I are learning about these things and relationships and the things that we've just naturally applied to ours, not stonewalling, but not stonewalling, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Really recognizing that we all do these things, and not just in our intimate relationships. I stonewall the shit out of my relationship with my mom, but it's because it's just such a difficult. I shut down. I engage in like avoidant behaviors. I try not to come home sometimes, and that sucks too. And recognizing these things is super important, especially in your intimate relationship, because stonewalling is just, for lack of other words, it's just unhealthy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not perfect in every relationship in my life.
You're perfect to me, babe.
I mean, a romantic relationship is a different dynamic. It is a good portion of
Mm-hmm.
your well-being, your lifestyle, the person you spend most of your time with and you communicate with. But when it comes to family members or people in your life that are a fixture, if you will, and yeah, I mean, we've all shut our family members out, but sometimes you deal with them, and you deal with them in the capacity that, I guess, to keep it as civil as possible, because sometimes when people aren't willing to grow or change, there's nothing else you could say or do. So sometimes you just avoid the conflict because you know it's going to drain everything out of you. And believe me, I've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at any relationship I've ever been in, every relationship I've had in my life, friendships or family members. They know when it comes to communicating with me, it's an intense interaction. But it gets to a point where it's like, how many of these intense interactions will I have before I literally just my head explodes? So sometimes we do these things. Nobody's
Yes.
perfect.
Yes. And what is it? Contrary to
Popular belief.
Yeah, we are not perfect. This is how we've come to know these things about ourselves, not in our own relationship, but just from life experiences.
Complete
So,
transparency.
yes. So, according to Dr. John and Julie Gottman, the antidote to stonewalling is self-soothing. Tony Robbins calls it changing your state, but I think it's pretty synonymous. Essentially, what this means is knowing when to take a break. And this does not mean, I emphasize, this does not mean avoiding the issue and distracting yourself and going somewhere and never talking about it again. What this does mean, though, is taking a moment to engage in something that is physiologically soothing or distracting. So, what does this mean? Either going for a walk, if you have a pet, spend some time with your pet, doing some reading, kind of like putting a pause, especially during a disagreement or when you're not feeling so good, putting a pause in it, taking some time to come back to a neutral state. I think this is just something that I thought of to kind of go with what I'm talking about. Have you ever tried to have a conversation with somebody who is in a heightened emotional state, and you're trying to just have a conversation and it just doesn't go well?
Yes. You get knee-jerk reactions, and you get some intense responses, and it's not good. You're not, first of all, that person's not thinking at the full capacity.
Yes, because they're thinking with emotion.
Yeah, they're at the stoplight, revving their engine, ready to drop the clutch like Dominic Toretto and go straight off, and you're just like, hey, I'm waiting in traffic for the next light, and it's like that. And I think for us, this is very important to take a break and walk away, because when you're in a calm state, you're going to be able to think it over and then come back with the way you normally feel at neutral state, which is, I love this person. I care about this person. I want to not hurt this person's feelings or say something that I will regret. That's why you do that. At a heightened state, you might fire away and then, shit, I said that. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. But that's when things get really ugly. So I think it's very important. It's important to do this. You got to nurture yourself. Sometimes our blood boils, and then it gets bad. It gets ugly. We Hulk out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I think it's about putting a pause on the conversation or whatever's happening. I know that there's moments where you and I have done that, where we're having a disagreement about something, or you're upset about something, I'm upset about something, and we just acknowledge, like, okay, we need to take a little bit of time and we'll revisit this. It doesn't mean that we're just going to pretend that it didn't happen, but we do, or we are able to acknowledge at least when we both need to take some time, which is
Yeah,
awesome. I love that we can do that. And my hope is that if you're listening, that you can take one of these things or reflect on all of them and see where they apply in your life. I also wanted to add something that I just thought about, that Tony Robbins said, Doctors John and Julie Gottman said about, it kind of ties into appreciation and taking responsibility and just communication in general. So they talk about the uh, communication ratio of positive to negative. So according to the doctors, the best way to keep a healthy relationship is to make sure that you have a positive to negative of 5 to 1. So for 5 positive things, maybe allow 1 not so good thing. Tony Robbins says, he said his ratio with his wife is actually more like 20 to 1. So 20 good things and 1 not so good thing. And when I heard him say this, I was like, you know, Andrew and I already do this. Like, we're just so, and it's not about ignoring the bad things either, or like the not so good things, but it's just making a conscious effort to see the good qualities in your partner. Because again, when you start to keep score, if you start to feel criticized, if you start to build, feelings of resentment and have those things unresolved, you start to see less, the ratio actually becomes more negative than positive. And this is super important to be mindful of. I loved hearing that from Tony Robbins, and even, learning about it from the doctors as well. I think that, like I said, I remember thinking, yeah, Andrew and I already do this. I remember I shared it with you. Like, that's so awesome. We already incorporate this into our relationship.
we did a lot of things intentionally. We had it was almost like we were building a house, and we went to Home Depot, we picked out the things, and then we kind of had a blueprint from our past experiences, which we put into this structure. And then we said, and then obviously willingness to do this, because we do care about each other and we have a great fondness and love for each other, that it allowed us to just do this naturally. And now that we implement it and we're very conscious of it, there's a structure out there that we happen to follow unknowingly, which is awesome. It's awesome to know you're on the right track, as opposed to like, holy shit, we're way off. What's going on? And I think a lot of people, if they heard this, because they're like, oh, it's like they know something's wrong, but they can't put their finger on it. But they're like, wow, the ratio is completely off. Wow, they could sit there and think, wow, I couldn't put a name to this, or I couldn't put an understanding of what this is, but wow, my relationship is really off, and this is why I feel this way. It's pretty intense when you find out,
Yes, it definitely can be, but I also think that it can be really helpful. Self-awareness doesn't always feel like a good thing, but it is, because you don't know until you know. So in learning about these things, somebody might say, oh, I do that, or maybe my partner does that. Doesn't mean that it's too late, but now you've got some form of identification to what are some of the things that are going on. Straying a little bit from this conversation, but still on topic, as we've been talking about these antidotes, I also think that adding our own, like, I know something for me that I think is important, and I think that Drew would agree, antidotes in your relationship is to have uncomfortable conversations about intimacy and what that looks like. Sex is part of a relationship, intimacy is part of a relationship. And so many times I've come across people who say things like, well, that's just in the honeymoon phase, like that passion, that love, that romance, that dies out with time. I like to personally believe that for Drew and I, that isn't actually true. I mean, we've only been together for a year, but I know I have been in relationships where like the first couple months, like it was already like I knew it wasn't working at that point. So having uncomfortable conversations, and what I mean by that is checking in with your partner of, hey, how is our intimacy for you? Is there anything that you want to try? Is there anything that I'm doing that you don't like? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe? Do you feel beautiful? Do you feel sexy? Having those conversations, I know Drew and I have had those conversations, and it's something that I so appreciate because you always make sure that I feel safe, and that's very big for me, especially because I've got sexual trauma in my past, and that's important to bring into the relationship. Not the trauma, but the concept of having that conversation. I think that's a really big one for me, and I think that people shy away from talking about it because they don't know how, but it definitely is important.
I think that with sex, it's like we share something together, but we have this private understanding of it, which we don't share with our partner. And that's for us on the side when we masturbate or whatever we do. It's like, oh, I'm into this, but my partner doesn't know. It's like, okay. And I think that's where it's like you have two different sex lives. You have the sex life with your partner, which, yeah, I do this. Yeah, she's happy with it. She's good. And I'm going to go indulge in whatever I'm doing because that's what I'm into. And instead of like, and listen, don't get me wrong, there are some couples where it's like, the woman might express something to her man, and it might be shot down and she might be humiliated for it, but vice versa too. Men at the same time will do things on the, and they don't know, they don't want to tell their girlfriend or their wife, because their wife will make them say, oh, you're disgusting. What's wrong with you? And it's like, sex is fun. First of all. Two, if you don't have a partner that is compatible and you need to be upfront with these things in the very beginning, then you need to find somebody that's part of the process of finding a partner, somebody you're compatible with, being open with and speaking. And me and Daniela, we're very outspoken with each other, and we talk about these things, our comforts, dislikes, things like that. It's awesome. I think it's part of the getting to know you phase, and finding somebody that is willing to accept you for who you are, and whatever your thing is, or you like, and vice versa. It's like, wow, you have a safe space now, and there's so much room for exploration. And I think there's such a disconnect and dysfunction in a lot of couples' sex lives. I mean, it's such an age-old thing. You watch movies, and it's part of the character flaws. It's like, oh yeah, the man going to the strip club because his wife won't wear lingerie, or something stupid like that. And it's like,
right.
And the woman sitting at home thinking, wow, my husband doesn't really look at me. And it's like, well, there's a miscommunication on both ends, and it could just be handled by having a conversation. And I think you need to have that, and we do.
Yes. So what about for you, babe? Is there anything that you would add to the antidote list for relationships?
So appreciation, taking responsibility, self-soothing,
gentle startup, having conversations.
Yeah, gentle startup. Yeah. I would think that I don't know if this would fall in any other specific one, but I think humor, right?
Oh, that's a good one.
I think humor is, there are couples that have different types of humor, different senses of humor. They're like yinning. They're like, you think that's funny, I think that's completely stupid, and I don't like your funny, and you don't like my funny. I think having laughter together and having silly moments is so important. It's almost like being children. Like when children get together and they do goofy, weird things together, and it's just they let themselves be free and they express themselves. Expression. I think that all that bottled up and being able to share that with somebody, I think is awesome, and it's good for your soul to laugh.
Oh, that was a good one. I like the humor. Yeah, you and I do.
Yeah.
If anybody ever runs into us at Target, or if you run into a couple at Target dancing randomly, that's probably Drew and I.
Most likely Target. You'll probably have, you'll
Yes.
see us more at Target. Target's our spot, or maybe the dollar store.
Yeah, Dollar Tree if anybody is around one.
Especially when you find a deal.
Yes.
Let's go.
So these are the antidotes. And part of a way to start to explore and evaluate where you are in your antidotes and your four horsemen is by doing the following: taking out a piece of paper and actually rating your level within each one. What is your level of criticism? How much do you find that you criticize your partner? Do you know what criticism is? Do you know what that feels like? And then going on to the others, what is your level of defensiveness? Are you, and you know what, defensiveness is understandable as human beings. Logically, we tend to defend ourselves when we feel threatened, and we need to evaluate what does that look like? You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how quick am I to defend myself? On a scale of 1 to 10, how quick is my partner to defend themselves? And so forth and so forth. And it's also important to evaluate your level of positive to negative communication, like Drew was saying. Just by doing that alone, it might give you a lot of insight into what factors are contributing to the downfall in your relationship if you're having, you know, a lot of struggle. If you're not, and you're listening and you're like, wow, like I incorporate all the antidotes, that's amazing, that's wonderful, keep at it. Yeah, that was what I wanted to add in there. I don't know if you want to add something else.
I don't know if this is redundant onto what Danielle is saying. I think that maybe you could dig into your, I don't know, the past few weeks, months, or whatever. When was the last time you did something really nice for your partner, or said something really nice, or like just open the door for them, or just did something just selflessly? When was the last time you did that? When was the last time they did that for you? Not to say that you keep score, but just kind of, sometimes we get lost in work. We're just so focused that we forget to be polite. Or you forget to say, hey, I love this meal, was excellent. I appreciate you for providing this meal for me. I thought it was delicious, by the way. And I can't say enough that I appreciate this food. It doesn't matter whether it was a TV dinner, something basic, pancakes, whatever. It's just sometimes being acknowledged and saying, the effort that you put in to make my life so much easier is it gives me, when I come home, it's peace of mind. And I just want you to know that you do that for me, or vice versa. When was the last time you did something like that? Because sometimes it's like so hard for somebody to just say good morning. Say good morning. Like saying good morning is hard for some people. You get so caught up in, I'm rushing out the door, you didn't even say goodbye or kiss them hello. Like, when was the last time? I want you to really dig into the past few months, kind of just get an idea of where you're at.
Yeah, I like that. Kind of like a check-in.
Yeah.
So here we go to start to summarize those of this really long rant that Drew and I have gone on. But these are the antidotes to the four horsemen. There is gentle startup, appreciation, which Drew and I's one of our favorites. Taking responsibility. I really enjoyed taking responsibility, and changing your state, or self-soothing, taking that time to take a break and recover from whatever it is that you're feeling, and then going back to your partner and realizing and making it a point to address the issue itself and not your partner as the issue. So these are the four horsemen. I mean, sorry. These are the four. This is the antidote to the horsemen.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. That's how you know I've been rambling for too long, but it's okay.
Yes. And I think that also, for all those hardworking people out there, we understand life is stressful, work is stressful. Just remember the person that you're coming home to if you live together, and, get yourself in that mind state to really appreciate them and tell them that you care about them very much.
Just like we appreciate you for listening.
Yes.
We thank you all.
We appreciate you all. We're grateful. And we hope that this information will take your relationship to the next level. Have a wonderful, wonderful next few days working through this. Do your homework. Bye-bye.